I'm Laird Klingler, librarian with the Cornish Historical Society. We're here for an interview at the home of Jim and Jody Schubert. The date is July 30th, 2019. Billy Scharf will be doing the filming. Well, Jim and Jody, thank you for inviting us into your home. And we started, Billy has done some shots of Jim's studio, and we'll get to your artwork later.
Sure.
But could we start with where and when you were born?
Okay. I was born in New York State, Sydney, New York in 1950. And
Is that upstate?
Upstate New York, right, near Binghamton. That's where my parents had grown up. And they, very shortly thereafter, though, moved to Florida, to Melbourne, Florida. And that's where I grew up. And went to New York regularly, for summer vacations to visit, especially my father's family. But my mom's family had all moved to Florida.
Where is Melbourne?
Melbourne's on the East Coast.
East?
Yep, about 50 miles south of Cape Kennedy. Well, maybe 20 miles south of Cape Kennedy.
Okay. Jim?
Yep, I was born in November the 8th, 1948 in Newport News, Virginia. And my folks moved to Florida the very next year. My dad was in the Air Force and was stationed there. And then we moved from Eglin Air Force Base, which is on the panhandle of Florida, to what was called O'Galley then, French name. But then the town of Melbourne sort of took over that community. So we met in O'Galley as high school kids.
Tell me about your childhood growing up.
Well, Florida at that time was very rural. I mean, not in some ways unlike what it is, in Cornish, or certainly in Cornish when we moved here. So, dirt roads, and my family did a lot of camping into the center state, but also in the immediate vicinity. And we grew up without air conditioning. It was a lot less pavement in Florida, a lot less building, and lots of fishing and going after shrimp. So you could catch a lot of your own food in that period of time. And, there was a space race got started. And so, it was wonderful to be able to see missiles really be taking off from the Cape. You could look at it on the TV and then walk outside and see and feel it. So that was our high school. O'Galley High School was a brand new school that was built, I think, because we're baby boomers, and in the area, there was a lot of people that were coming to to work on the space program, and so there were many children, and more schools were built to accommodate the growth that was happening in Florida at that time. So we spent a good bit of our growing up on the beaches of Florida.
Yeah. Jim?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Like I say, my dad was in the Air Force and consequently was involved with the space program for many years. And yeah, we were, as young people, kids in elementary school and on, I mean, just the neighborhood that I grew up in was very close to the intracoastal waterway, what was called the Indian River, and of course there were it had been inhabited by the Ayes Indians for many centuries prior to our sort of discovery of the area. And so in the places that I would play as a kid, you could find pieces of pottery and arrowheads and things like that. And a place that we call the Point, which is now fortunately an area that's been taken over by the town, and there's tennis courts and that sort of thing there. But it was a beautiful yacht basin. So a lot of the folks that had yachts and were traveling the intercoastal back in the 20s and till now would travel through that area, and they would put in at the O'Galley Yacht Basin, which is very kind of a unique place. I mean, the water you could see alligators, porpoises, manatee, sharks, all in this one little body of water. So that's kind of what I grew up with, you know, snorkeling and swimming and fishing and that sort of
And
thing.
eventually surfing, of course.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Well, then, how did you meet then?
We met at that high school.
High school?
Yep, 10th grade for me, 11th grade for him. And he transferred into my chemistry class. He had noticed me and thought that he'd like to try to get to meet me. So, so anyway, we didn't learn book chemistry that year very well.
No, we had
but we got excited about each other.
yeah, our teacher was Hans Schneider, and he knew that we were kind of in love, and I think really got a kick out of the two of us just
really?
sort of being googly-eyed at one another.
Yeah,
Well, did you go on then to school after high school? Or what
yeah, Jim graduated before I did, and he got started at Florida State, in Tallahassee, and I finished my high school year, and then there was a really very nice and very new community college in Brevard County, and 20 miles from my house. And for economical reasons, I lived at home and attended Brevard Community College for 2 years. Jim came back after his first year at FSU and decided to join me at the Brevard Community College. And then after I guess we graduated simultaneously from there, and then we both went back, well, for me the first time, but went back to Florida State, and that's where we finished out college. I was an English major. I planned to teach high school, and Jim was a religion major. Actually wanted to be an art major, but didn't get into the program early enough, so he decided to major in religion. So we did that until August of 71, when we got married on the beach, near to a beach that we grew up frequenting. And had a lot of memories, and it was a beautiful location. And then we came here on our honeymoon. My brother Bill was living in Plainfield on Center of Town Road, and with his wife, and he had come to the area well, he of course grew up in Florida too, but he was a conscientious objector to the Vietnam War, and his alternate service was to work at Mary Hitchcock Hospital as an orderly.
Yes.
So that's what got him to Hanover, and we came to visit him on a camping honeymoon, and got excited about the Upper Valley and the White Mountains and all the things that were to do here. Really.
How did you make out there in the Vietnam period?
Yeah, well, I ended up not being able to go in. I had sort of borderline epilepsy at the time, and I was not really in favor of the involvement there, but and did work at becoming conscientious objector as well. But I think the quota was filled for my draft board, so I did not succeed in getting that, and then consequently, though, I ended up having some seizures and was deferred from that. But going back to coming here on our honeymoon, basically, I had never seen snow or the seasons really, because I really grew up in Florida and Virginia. It's not quite far enough north and I wasn't there, but for a year or so. So we saw snow. I saw snow, and I was really astounded with that, and just thought that was just amazing. And of course, when we were in college, it was the late '60s, early '70s when we graduated. There was kind of the era of the Whole Earth catalog and sort of a back to the land movement and idea. And so seeing her brother Bill living in an old cape on Centertown Road that had no running water, had a hand pump for a well outhouse, and he had chickens and a cow, and I was like, this is what we want to do. Mm-hmm. So we went back to Florida for another year and a half or so. Jody was teaching. I worked at Florida Institute of Technology as part of a grounds crew for a year, and then And I was doing artwork then as well, doing sort of art shows and festivals and that sort of thing. But then we decided, okay, let's make the move. And so we told our folks we're heading north. So we had a Volkswagen Beetle and a trailer and a dog, and we put everything we owned into it and drove up. And lived in West Lebanon for 6 months or so, and both got jobs in Hanover. On the street there, on the main street.
Yeah, I worked for a little place called Home Decor Shop. Jim was working at the Hanover, the men's clothing part of the Hanover Co-op, and then eventually to Roger Burt Printing for a while. And I eventually went to work at Dartmouth Printing before I took a position at Priori, which is where I really spent the majority of my career, 40 years there, working in human resources. But yeah, we were very excited about the whole idea of buying land and building a house and growing our own food. And I mean, it was a very romantic idea, and the reality of it was a lot harder than but we were young and stupid and
we had a lot of energy.
We had a lot of energy, and we were willing to put our backs into it to
So
get done.
so that's early 70s.
Yes.
Did you purchase the land here then?
Again, Bill had met some people that lived in Meriden, Tony Quimby and his wife Emily, and they owned property here in Cornish that came down through his family, and they needed to sell some of that property, and there was a 70-acre parcel that he sold to us, and so that's we walked the land in a couple of seasons and looked at it, and the thing that made it really possible for us, again, we really didn't have much in the way of money or a nest egg to get started, and Tony was willing to sell us the land and let us pay him a monthly payment for 5 years until we'd completed our the cost.
Really great.
So that was wonderful, and very little interest charged. And at that land, that it was $250 an acre at that time.
The Quimbys lived like where Martha Zorheim and her husband lived now. So that was all part of that land?
Yes, so Peggy Ogilvy,
Yes,
who
Peggy,
you know, and her
yes.
sisters were the nieces of Tony and Emily. And so we met them when they were teenage girls. And they would come up and visit their aunt and uncle, and were wonderful singers and performers then. So that was a collective of people that we got to know early on.
So that would be Peggy's parents then?
Peggy's aunt and uncle.
Aunt and uncle.
And
sorry.
her parents owned, Fern Hill, up on Dingleton. They call it Fern Hill is the name of the house. Her parents lived there, or had a summer place there.
Now, I should have stressed at the beginning, we're actually on St. Gordon's Road here.
Right?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
And we're in the Dingleton Hills.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, what's kind of remarkable to me is that, we were focused on land and a place to live and put down roots. We didn't know about such things as southern exposure would be good for a shorter winter or maybe an easier winter. Flat, maybe some area that's flat so you could garden or put a house down a little bit more easily. We didn't even, I think, really even appreciate that this was that St. Gaudens Historical Site was part of what this was all about.
Yeah, we'd heard of it and knew something about it, but having not really lived in Cornish, I mean, we didn't know sort of the history of St. Gaudens or the Cornish colony, really, for that matter. I mean, we just kind of happened into that, and
We feel so fortunate.
It's like, wow, what better place could we have?
Yeah, what a beautiful place. And so, we got to know, our neighbors, and there were fewer houses then, but, at the very end of St. Gaudens, Fernald Hill, was Claudia and Michael Itzevich. And Mike had cows, and we would get our milk from him, our raw milk.
Really?
Drive up there and get that. And then Virginia Colby and Stan were both living. Jesse and Marion Stone over on Gap Road. Orville was still alive then. And
Stephen
Sharp was our neighbor, Billy's father.
Yeah.
So there were, we feel like, at this point in time,
We're-
we've sort of moved ahead in time, and now we're the old timers in Cornish, and
Yeah.
so many of those wonderful neighbors are gone.
But then you started building this home. Yes.
Right, we did.
Tell us about, you told me a little in the beginning, but when I came, but tell us about your early days here and how you provided your roof over your head,
Yes.
or your
Yes.
lack of roof.
Well, we mentioned we bought the land in '73, and we finally moved out onto the property in '75. It will have been the spring of '75, and I had just gotten a full-time position working for an engineering firm in Hanover, and Jim knew that he was going to be doing building of this house full-time, and so we had camped many times before, and we thought, well, we can do this, and we were allowed to stay on the property in tents because we had built a state-approved outhouse. That was one of the requirements before we could get a building permit. And so we had our outhouse, we had our fire ring for cooking outside, and we had 3 tents. That one we slept in, one we cooked food in, and one I kept my clothes in for work. And we had a preliminary driveway, I guess you'd call it, so we could get building supplies up the hill and into the the building site. And so
And the winters you were there.
we moved into the house, which still was missing a wall, an external wall, in December of '75, and it just was too cold.
She said, "I'm moving. I'm moving in right now."
I think 3 walls are better than a tent, so we moved in, and then we continued to build all the rest of the winter, and well, we are still building, Laird.
Well, it occurred to me, because you were discussing before that you're very close up here to the famous Barrett stone glass house.
Right,
And when Barrett came to Cornish, he first lived in a teepee.
right.
So actually, you have a link there.
I never thought about that.
Yeah,
Really.
And then, as I said to you, he married this woman who was a graduate of Vassar, and Vassar graduates don't live in teepees. So then he started to build. That's when he started to build this glass house. You've been to the glass house many times.
We have. The
Yes.
ruins are beautiful, and one of the things that's happened over time is, like everything around us, the trees grow, and I can remember sitting on the hilltop there, no trees at all in the view, and watching snow geese fly by, and so it has really grown in over
Watching
time.
what?
Snow geese flying by.
What are snow geese?
Snow geese are,
Oh, snow geese.
Snow geese, yes,
Okay.
yeah, and so which brings me to one of the things that maybe because we live so close to nature, I really got into birding, so that's become a lifelong hobby for me, and really enjoy learning what's around us, and we certainly have seen plenty of wildlife living here.
So then, and you started tell us about your family.
Yes, so we were here in the house, which was very rustic. We lived the first year without water, and we did have electricity. That was great, but no running water for the first year. And we didn't actually put in our septic system for about 15 years. So we continued to use our state-approved outhouse, and did have a shower and sink and running water for those sorts of things. Hot water, which was wonderful. But we added a Schubert. Hillary Schubert was born in 1978 in a blizzard, one of the largest blizzards I think that we ever experienced
At
here.
APD.
Yeah, and she was born at APD, not at home, and so she grew up utilizing an outhouse as a little person, and so she has stories to tell of her own now that she has a house in Atlanta and 3 bathrooms of her own.
Gotta clean them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Is she the only child?
No, we have second daughter, Allie. Allison was born in '83, and so they both attended Cornish Elementary School. And when it came time for high school, Hillary went to Hartford in Hartford, Vermont. And by that point in time, Jim was working at Kimball Union Academy. Well, at the time that Allie was going to be heading off to high school. And so that's where Allie went to high school. So they both have have moved away from the Cornish area. They love coming home and they love going to the Cornish Fair and of course coming to see us. But Hillary lives in Atlanta and has for about the last 14 years. And Allie has made a career for herself in Manhattan, selling real estate.
New York.
New York, right?
Oh, my.
So city kids, not too uncommon for Cornish kids to, grow up in these country roads and then.
And how many grandchildren do you have then?
We have two. We have two boys.
Two
Yeah,
boys.
Yeah. After raising two girls, we have now experienced what it's like to have boys in the family. So we have Cooper, who's 9, and Owen, who was 3.
So they like coming here, though?
They do. And
Yeah.
Cooper, for the first time this year, agreed to come for about 2 weeks before his family came on their vacation. They usually come, for a couple weeks every year. So we had a great time, and he loved it. So.
Tell me about your career, your working career.
Sure. So, I mentioned that I had planned to teach high school English. I didn't pursue that. Instead, I ended up going to work for a small engineering company in Hanover. And at the time I joined, there were about 30 people. So my work at Criari started in working in the administrative arena, and then I had a chance to take on some human resources responsibilities. Back then it was called personnel, and so that meant that I would be working at hiring people and doing some training, and if there were problems with employees, helping them sort through that, and ensuring that employees had benefits. So that's really what I continued to do for a career there of about 40 years. And I became the human resources manager, and loved that work. Found it very interesting.
What was
and
the name
very
of the
rewarding.
company?
Criari.
Criari?
Yeah, it means in Latin it means to create. And there have been 6 or 7 companies that have spun off from that company over the years. So Criari really did add significantly, I think, to the employment base for the Upper Valley area. So I was doing, I guess you'd call the office sort of work, and Jim was pursuing his art in a variety of different ways.
Then you went to then teach at KUA?
Yeah, eventually. Before, though, just to back up a little bit, when I was building on the house, I was working at Tariki Stoneware in Meriden. I worked there for about 12 years as a production potter, and learned that skill through Jack and Eric O'Leary. And it was a great place to work because close to home for one thing, and close to our building site where we lived here. So they were very easy to work with, and just scheduling wise and stuff. So that was very convenient for me. And then I left there for a couple of reasons. They were moving from more wheel-thrown production to larger sculptural pieces, which was interesting and fun and stuff, but just the difficulty of moving the large objects for me was a little bit too much. I suffered a hernia, and it was like, okay, I think I'm going to move on. And at that time I was also doing some design work for stave puzzles up in Norwich, Vermont. I designed limited edition prints for them for a number of years, and then I would hand color those. So I was able to do that while building, and then also I was kind of the house dad for before the kids started school. So I was kind of a stay-at-home dad, and so I was juggling a few things. So, but after I left Tariki, it was a year or so, I guess I was really into the puzzle work. That sort of came to a close, and I knew that there was an opening at KUA. Was asked if I'd be interested in teaching pottery there. So since I'd had that skill, I thought, well, check it out. And I started there, and found that I really enjoyed working with kids and teaching them what I knew about that. And then over the years, I was there 16 years, and so I began to teach other subjects as well, painting and drawing and photography, black and white photography. And so that was fun. So then, I eventually retired from KUA and just decided to pursue more freelance work.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to say a little bit more about Jim's house spouse, stay-at-home dad. So when Allie was born in '83, we were sort of overwhelmed by the idea of trying to get 2 children out of the house and, into daycare. At that point, Hillary was in elementary school, but she would have to have after-school care, and made a decision that that it made sense to us that at that point in time I was earning the higher salary, and that I would just continue to work, and it looked like my career would continue to grow and develop, and Jim could do some of his art at home, and he was willing to be at home with a baby. So he was really Allie's caregiver until she went to kindergarten, and he had his hands full. And at that point in time, we needed to add on to the house because it wasn't large enough. So you were building, you were taking care of Allie, and you were doing your artwork. So and he also had dinners ready, and it was wonderful. I loved it, and I never wanted him to go back to a regular job.
Who cooks now? Who cooks today?
I cook a lot more today, but I guess you paid your dues. But anyway, when he decided to go to KUA, I was devastated. And I said, I don't think that's a very good idea, but it was a great idea for him, and he was ready to be out of the house. And Allie was at that point had started elementary school at Cornish, so it worked out. But boy, those were some interesting years.
I know of your paintings. I didn't know about the pottery work that you had done before. And just in terms of your paintings, I think it's wonderful. With your artwork, you really are carrying on the tradition, the artistic tradition of the Cornish colony. I mean, you're a part of that.
Yeah, well,
Yes,
it's life. Life continues on, I guess. I mean, it wasn't a conscious decision to move here for that particular reason, but it is
serendipitously,
very neat.
it's
a wonderful place to live. I mean, it is kind of in the earth here, and I can see why those folks came here, because we spent an afternoon down at St. Gaudens the other evening, and it was just so heavenly. I mean, just the light and everything. So,
yes.
Now, at the beginning of the interview, Billy has some shots, from your studio, which is right adjacent to the house, here. And I've seen your artwork. You had an exhibit at KUA, I remember that I went to. Your art is very varied. Some is very abstract, some is more realistic. You don't seem to have one particular approach. You seem to have a great deal of variety in your work.
Yeah, I it's just, I see art everywhere, for one thing, and I love to look at art. I love to see what people are doing, and whenever I'm starting something, it's like, I get new ideas. I mean, and it's just fun. It's just an exploration. I feel like an explorer, kind of. So I mean, right now I am pursuing work in oil and landscapes, somewhat impressionistically done. But while we were building, and I was working at this pottery studio, we did quite a lot of raku for fun, which is a very neat process where you're working with fire and smoke and stuff, and that sent me off in a direction that I pursued for a number of years of sort of pyrotechnic work, where I make a small chamber in 2 feet of snow, put some combustible materials down in there, maybe take a canvas and put water on it that would freeze, and that ice would become a mask, lay that on top of this chamber and let the smoke penetrate into the canvas, and use that as kind of a place to begin sort of a creative endeavor. So it's fun to just play, with materials and see what happens. You have failures, but sometimes you have these wonderful surprises, which is kind of the carrot that kind of keeps me going along. And
now, I think what you said before, you're going to be the artist in residence at the Cornish Fair, in the gallery there.
Well, so in the past, good friend Gary Hamill, who's been an artist in residence for many years at the fair. It's their 200th anniversary in his town of Orange, and so he's very involved there this year. So it kind of opened up, and I was asked if I'd be interested in pursuing, kind of taking his place. And I thought, yeah, it sounds good. I'm going to be working more sort of different sites on the campus
In
of
the
the
past,
fair.
they've had them in the town hall.
Yeah, he's usually set up in there and working
Right,
on
right.
on one specific piece, and he's got a nice collection of Cornish, people and themes from past fairs. I thought, well, I didn't want to, kind of do what he's doing by creating kind of a record in that way. I thought, well, I'll just go out and I'll do some drawing and some painting and talk with people, and they're curious about the process, just to be somebody there to
Interesting. Yeah.
kind of talk.
Before I get to Jody's activities, I know also that you were involved in the 250th book. In the art section, I remember that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
very
that was fun to kind of go
It's
back.
one
and-
of your paintings is in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that actually is a drawing, a pen and
drawing?
ink drawing. It's a actually sort of an illustration for a novel that I wrote. That after I left KUA, I kind of wrote a sort of historical fiction novel.
Is it
And,
published?
It's an ebook. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Really?
it's called The Maya and the Moor, and
Really?
and it was fun process. I worked on it for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, and it was an opportunity to kind of relive parts of my childhood, along the Indian River and some early history of that area and stuff.
Jody, I know that you're very active with Aging in Place.
Right.
In Cornish. Talk about that. Talk about those
Yep.
activities.
Well, since I retired in 2015, I really wanted to engage in Cornish life in a way that I really don't feel that I had the time or that I took the time to do when I was working. Driving to Hanover every day and having a very full job meant that I was really ready to rest and relax when I got home in the evenings, and so I had gotten involved with Jan Lord the year before I retired, doing a project that got kicked off by I think Dartmouth Hitchcock actually, and it was called doing senior stories. And we both were recruited to be engaged with that. And we said, well, we'd like to do it, but we really don't want to go all over the Upper Valley. We'd like to, if we're going to do interviews of seniors and hearing their stories, and they had an interview set of questions that they wanted us to ask. We want to really focus our attention in Cornish. So we had the privilege to interview quite a number of seniors. There might have been 30 or 40 people that we interviewed as a result of that early work. And when that work came to an end, we decided that we'd like to continue. We were really enjoying it. And at that point in time, Jan was already a member of Aging in Place committee and encouraged me to join. So I did. And together, she and I and a couple of other people really got, continued that process of talking with people in Cornish, trying to understand, what their challenges were, aging in place, and try to provide information about what resources were available that people might not know of, and then learn what needs there might be that as a committee we could alert the town, the selectmen, or the committee that you worked on, Laird, which is neighbor to neighbor. And so we thought that there would be opportunities to team together to find out how we can support each other as we grow older in Cornish. So that's been really rewarding work, and I continue to be involved with that committee. We haven't done as many interviews of late. I think we maybe talked with most of the people that were quite interested and wanted to be interviewed. There's a course that we worked with, the Upper Valley. There's an Upper Valley interfaith group that developed a course called Useful Tools for Aging with Dignity. And Jan and I did offer that course a couple times in Cornish. And Debbie Dvorak is also somebody now involved with that. And we haven't offered that course again recently, but we will again.
How are those interviews being stored?
They were, we basically had a questionnaire. We,
As a librarian, I have to ask that.
right,
In
right.
terms of,
That's a good
and
one.
how are
we
you
didn't,
keeping them?
well, when we
what,
were,
what form do they exist?
yeah, well, the Senior Stories Project required the interviewers to tape the interviews. When we continued just on our own, we decided that we didn't feel that was necessary. So we were simply working from a questionnaire that we had developed and recording answers. And we have a file that we've accumulated. And the information for a period of time, we were entering the information into a database called SurveyMonkey, that computerized program that would allow us to massage the information, pull it together. But it's literally, in our houses, this information at this point in time. And it led to actions on behalf of Cornish residents where there was a need to do something for someone or to get back to them about another item. The committee itself has developed a brochure about resources that are available to people in Cornish.
Very nice. It's nice. Yes.
Yeah, and that will be updated. So it's ongoing work, but
You haven't really been able to establish a community nurse.
no, and we've looked into that, quite a bit. There is a cost associated with it, of course, and some of the wealthier towns, I guess I'll say, in the Upper Valley have been able to do that. With obviously more people in town as well. So no, we haven't, but it's something that we continue to look at and hope we might be able to do. More recently, I just joined the Cornish Conservation Commission. There was a notification on Connect Cornish that said there was interest, and I actually did serve on that commission in the early years that I was living in Cornish. Mike Savage, the older Mike Savage, and I were cohorts on that, and that was interesting. I would say that probably my career and my child, having children and raising a family, got in the way of continuing, with that. So it's wonderful to be, reconnecting. Driving on roads in Cornish, that I maybe never had driven on, meeting people that I'd heard about and knew their name but didn't know them. So that has really been, very rewarding. I also started volunteering with the Four Winds program at the Cornish school. So since my own grandchildren don't live close by, I have the opportunity to work in the school, and I have been focused on the kindergarten classes, so that's been really fun.
You've also become something of a birder.
Yes,
Is that the term? Is that, do you say birder? I don't know.
Yeah, I do. That's great, Larry.
Okay.
Yes, that's something that I got involved with, when my children were little, and I thought, I need a hobby. I need something that really takes me, out of doors and out of my responsibilities for a while. And so I've been enjoying birding all these years and increasing, my skills. And so this year, I worked with my sister-in-law we did a 3-part instructional series for the Meriden Bird Club, and that was really fun, and it was educational for me. And then I led a couple of bird walks and a couple in the Korea property, and that was really fun.
I've seen that on Connect Cornish. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, it's really it's a way to be out of doors and just see and enjoy the beauty all around us.
I always like to ask about experiences in Cornish, past and present. So you came here in the, say, the early 70s.
Yes.
That was about the time the interstates, were probably completed.
Yes.
And
That's
the
true.
Upper Valley did begin to change at that point. For example, the big box stores up in West Lebanon.
Right.
Were they there when you moved in?
The only one that was there was the grocery store Purity
Supreme, I think, is what
So
it
you
is.
remember the open fields.
We do.
Yeah.
All corn.
Yeah, tell us about your initial experiences and what you see now in the Upper Valley all around you.
Well, for me, the primary thing is that I had not one red light between me and my employer. So I can't even count the number of red lights that there are now between, here and the Etna Road in Hanover where I worked. So,
6, I think. There's 6.
are you counting? Yeah, I don't, many. And there was no traffic. So, my commute got longer as the years went by. I loved the fact that we left Florida because it was developing and Disney was moving in, and we didn't want to live in that kind of environment. So we were thrilled to be living in an area that didn't seem to change at all, and it didn't for many, many, many years. And there's certainly more houses, more retail shopping, which for all the recruiting that I did for the Criari all those years, one of the big complaints that people that were moving to the area had was that there was just no shopping, and they would have to move. They would have to drive to Boston, or they didn't even know about Manchester, so they felt like they had to go to Boston to do any kind of shopping for clothing, specialty foods, and they were. That was a big deal. That was something that had to convince people that, they could actually live here, and there were other things to do other than just mall shopping. The Powerhouse Mall that's the mall that we had, that
When
looked
that was built,
when that was built in the Mascoma there, and so what did we do? We really
Powers Country Store.
right.
I bought most of the building materials for the house at Powers.
At Powers?
Yeah.
And we bought our kids snow boots and winter coats every year there, and
Groceries.
and groceries. So,
Okay, where did you shop for groceries?
well, Pure de Supreme, that would have been it in those early days, and little stores,
Did you go
that
to
were
Windsor,
around.
for example?
No,
Not so much.
no, we didn't. There wasn't a Price Chopper over there, and so. Yeah, we didn't venture over into Vermont
We
very
really
much.
didn't, yeah.
It was, me mostly going to Hanover and you going to Meriden, to work, and so that was a big part of what our circle was. Yeah.
People, when I've asked this question, they generally focus on two areas. If they're much older, they focus first on the roads,
Yes.
and then secondly, situation today, the declining school enrollment. Now, you live on a private driveway, so you maintain your own driveway. Have you noticed a difference in the maintenance of the roads since you've been here?
I have always been pretty pretty worried about springtime and mud season. So for the possibility that our cars were not going to make it through.
Where around here would the mud season be bad? Lang Road?
It kind of varies. It sort of depends on the year in a way. I mean,
I agree. Yeah, it means occasionally it would be St. God. I mean, the good news for us, we always said, was we have 5 different ways that we can come into our place. You could come over Gap Road, you can come up from Hell Hollow, you can come over Salinger's Hill, you could come up from St. Gaudens. So, and there were times, whether it might be a freak storm or mud season, that you would have to find the best way to come. I am also thankful for the lower taxes that Cornish has compared to so many other towns, and part of that probably has something to do with road maintenance and the cost of that. And I always sort of feel that Cornish likes to sprinkle dust, fairy dust, and Plainfield likes to lay down gravel in the wintertime. And I did get stuck on Hell Hollow one year, and it was a year that if suddenly the mud just came and the roads went out, and I had a wrecker who came and said that he didn't think he would be able to help me. I persevered with him, and he did pull my car out. But there, it's a tough situation.
yeah.
Jim?
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure exactly. I mean, like I say, sometimes the roads are bad. But I think overall our roads are better. Just the dirt road. I'm referring to the dirt roads. I mean, they have to be, given the amount of material that's been put on. And, I mean, everybody sort of has a theory of what's the best way to do it. And I certainly, I'm no expert. And I applaud those guys that come out and do what they do. So I'm not complaining. And, it's part of where we live. It's part of the price you have to pay. I mean, I love living where we are. I mean, I love just hearing the train. Once in a while, a plane flies over. We're out in the woods, and to me, it's worth that.
You're going to have rugged roads, and you're going to have animals that you can become annoyed with, like a bear, or I mean.
I'm not annoyed.
You're not annoyed.
I think it's great.
Well, I'm a
having
little
animals.
frightened by,
Have you seen
Close-
bears up here?
Oh yes,
Mm-hmm.
yes. Well, you see, I do feed the birds, and I've learned to take my bird feeders down by April 1st. But if the bears are hungry when they go to bed, they get up early, and then they come sooner than you might expect.
Yeah.
And then they remember that from year to year that they had a good meal at your place, so they come back.
That's it.
Yeah.
And they have come back. So
Well, then of course the other issue is declining school enrollment.
Mm-hmm.
yes. Yep.
Why do you think that's happened?
I'm guessing that that our generation, our children, didn't stay here. That so many people that may have moved to Cornish, and it was a full school. When our kids were there.
You would have gone to the consolidated school. I mean, the children.
What? Say that again.
The consolidated school. After there were one-room schoolhouses. But yes, you
Yes.
would have gone to this.
Our children went
Yes.
to the new school,
Yes.
and then there was a gym built during the
Right.
period of time that our kids were at Cornish. And so there was, a gaining, I would say, of children during that period of time. And, I think a lot of the children maybe that grew up with our kids, have moved away rather than staying and developing, their own lives here, or building more houses, or having children. So that maybe, I think I'm hoping that we maybe are beyond, a real reduction. There was talk about maybe combining Cornish and Plainfield schools, but it seems like there's a little bit of an increase in the enrollment. And, certainly the property prices in surrounding towns are high. And I hired a number of people at Creary who chose Cornish because, and they are younger people, and they are having children, and they were attracted to, the town, but also to the lower taxes in Cornish. And so, I'm hoping, for wins, it seemed like the kindergarten class not doubled, but there were a substantial increase I've been with them now 3 years, and I've seen an increase in enrollment.
Jim, what do you think?
Yeah, I concur, I guess, pretty much with what Jody says. I mean, maybe we scarred our children by having no indoor plumbing for a while.
rugged.
They decided, we need to just move. It's a different era. I mean, I guess kids, the horizons are quite broad for younger people, and I guess if people are moving in sort of a technological more realm, they can find work anywhere, really, and I mean, obviously there's not as many people farming or working the land as there once was, and I'm sure that has some impact on it.
One thing that I think would impact certainly our children's ability, they can work from home for some of their work, but they're in an area where they have high-speed internet. So I do think that the lack of internet services, reliable internet services, will have an impact on people being able to choose this area for example, to work.
There also is the issue, although everyone wants to maintain the rural character, of the town, there is the question about are our land use policies impacting on having young people come into the community. There are different views of current use. Steve Taylor has mentioned that current use is basically a property tax transfer. In other words, people with not in current use are absorbing the costs that would have been deducted. That. Are our land use policies encouraging younger people to move into the community?
I guess I didn't note that as a reason that I think people are not necessarily coming.
The 5-acre
Cornish.
zoning also is a part of that too.
Right. Right.
Could we have more areas, for example, that have, like in the flat, like could there be more 1-acre zoning areas?
Right.
Possibly. That maybe could be off-putting, to some individuals. I don't know, and I guess I'd have to spend a little bit more time talking with people, select board or the planning board to really understand better myself even what our land use policies are. An area of edification for myself.
Yeah, a lot of the statistics really haven't been made available either. George Edson has always said, I would like to see concretely the impact of current use, on the taxpayer situation. We don't really have those figures. We can say, as Steve Taylor has said, there's a property tax transfer. We know that. That happens. How significant is it?
Right.
A lot of times we don't really have those figures, but I know it has come up in Concord. There have been discussions about this.
Yeah.
You benefit from current use here, right?
We do.
Yes.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So it would. This is a fair amount of acreage if you were not in current use.
When I ask this question, as you have said, frequently parents will say, "Well, my children have moved." Where are the young people, as you were, moving in with the young children? Is that happening in a way? And you make a good point too that technology has changed a great deal. That
Yes.
The young people, want to be in a situation where they can take advantage of technology.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things that I heard, certainly over the last 5 years that I worked, is that so many of the young people, and these were mostly engineering, trained individuals, but people that were moving to the area, wanted to be in a town center. They wanted to be able to walk or bicycle to shopping, or maybe they could bicycle to work. So places like Lebanon, Hanover, of course, but Hanover was often too expensive. But Lebanon, for example, or even Lebanon was really quite a draw, and I think there's been certainly changes. One of the biggest changes in the Upper Valley, and I think of it of both Vermont and New Hampshire, is White River Junction.
Yes.
And even Windsor has really, I think, developed more over the years that we've lived here. So there's growth and there's change, and then there's still things like go down to McNamara's dairy on the river and get your milk if you want to.
Sure,
So
sure.
I love it that that still exists, and that there are farm families that remain here. The Franklin Farm, and there are apple orchards and Edgewater Farm and the vegetables, and that's moving to another generation. So thank goodness for
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think I finished the questions that I want, but as I said to you in the beginning, at the end of these interviews, people always think, "Oh, I forgot to say that," or something I should have said.
Yeah.
And is there anything else that you would like to add that maybe we haven't covered, or?
Well, we talked a little bit about aging in place, and one of the things that we've talked about quite a bit is, we grew up in Florida, so does that mean that we're going to retire to Florida? And no, we've retired to Cornish, and we really want to stay here as long as we can, and so trying to find ways to make it easier as we get older. And I guess I'd just say from my experience working with Aging in Place Committee that the volunteerism and the level of support that neighbors give to one another is really encouraging, and it makes Cornish the place that it is, and makes me want to stay here. And our parents grew old in Florida and died there, and it's not a place where I want to spend my my last years. And I'm glad that we still have the health that we do to be able to enjoy skiing and snowshoeing and enjoy winter. And I'm really happy that there's somebody that will plow the driveway.
Yeah, we did walk up and down that driveway for many years.
We did, yes.
We didn't
plow it.
Did you park the car at the bottom of
Parked
the
at the bottom and
Yeah.
slid the kids up on a sled and the groceries, and
Yeah.
it was just
Well, people will talk. Older people will talk about that, how they would park their cars at the bottom of the
Yes,
road,
yes.
mud season and snow.
Right, right. Well, there was a period of time, of mud season, where I would park my car down at the Plainfield Library because I had a Prius and Jim had a Subaru. So we needed to, keep a car that didn't do well in snow somewhere else
I see.
in the worst of times. So,
a couple times.
yes, yeah.
Well, people should look for you at the Cornish Fair then,
Yeah,
being your
that'd
artist in residence.
Stop by and say hello. It'll be fun to
Good.
chat and
Yeah.
just
Yep.
enjoy the day.
Yes, and be sure to come by the flower room for the Cornish Garden Club. We'll have a great display going on there. I'm looking
Good.
forward to it.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And Billy, we always like to say at the end, Billy, that's a take.
Okay.